Hi, my name is Sheila. Welcome. In this video, we're going to be breaking down the Vanessa Bryant lawsuit where the pictures of the helicopter crash and I guess her family and the other members who were in that helicopter were shared among some employees. So we're going to be breaking that lawsuit down. But first, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Sheila. I am a licensed attorney. I have been licensed for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years next month. Now, in the past, I haven't talked a whole lot about lawsuits that are going on. I actually have taught entertainment and business law over at a local law school. And let me show you. This is the book that we used for that class. Big book. A lot of times in law school, there's a lot of conversation in terms of analyzing cases from the textbook and not a whole lot of conversation or dialogue about what's going on in the world. One of the things that I really enjoyed when I was teaching this particular class, and I taught it twice, one of the things I really enjoyed was that I would actually bring in articles and information about lawsuits, news, current events that were going on to help students be able to not just learn from the textbook, but to see how it worked in the real world. And it was actually a lot more interesting for them, and it was just a lot more fun to me. Being able to teach in that way. So now I'm going to be sharing more of that kind of information here on my channel, the audio on a podcast, so that we can learn a little bit more. I was really hesitant to especially take this one on because I feel like, and you guys tell me too if you feel the same way, I felt like, the family had already gone through enough. Those families had already gone through enough to lose their family members, to have other people take pictures of what had happened and to share them with just so little respect for human life and for the tragedy that had occurred. This was one that I was really hesitant to talk about, but I really wanted to talk about it because maybe by talking about it and understanding, maybe we bring a little bit more humanity and civility back to things. So I'm going to be talking about this. One of the first things I want to go to, though, is to talk about the settlement aspect of this before we jump into the lawsuit, because we're definitely going to be deep diving into the lawsuit. I'm taking a look at most of it, and I know some of the things I want to talk about. But let me just go really quickly as I put back on my glasses, because it has been just about 20 years. Let me see if I can pop over here. I'm just going to talk about this one because I didn't have it already up, but just the article that appeared in Sports Illustrated where Vanessa Bryant talked about why she was not taking a settlement. And let me actually let me add that in here because I think it's worthwhile to bring that back up and take a look at it. Let's see. Well, of course, that means I lost one of my screens and I had to start all back over again. All right, let's see, Sports Illustrated. Let's bring this one up and talk about this one. All right, so Vanessa Bryant reveals why she has not settled the crash photo lawsuit. So let me scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so down here she says, you see what she says right here. While two other families received 1.25 million from the county to resolve similar lawsuits last year, Bryant refuses to settle the case as the trial continues on. I mean, they went through a lot. All of them did, and she said she's just willing to fight for that justice for her husband and her daughter. That's what she told the court. And, as well as Chris Chester, who lost his wife and daughter in the crash. And they're saying that the county violated their constitutional rights to control the death images of their loved ones. Again, this was already such a tragedy, and it must feel like even harder to have somebody then come take advantage of the situation and what's going on. So just totally devastating in that respect. So let me pop back over here and let's see if we can now pull up the lawsuit and take a look at that, because that is what we're going to be breaking down here. Let's see. Let's get rid of that. Let's add back in our lawsuit here. And this lawsuit is about 41 pages. That's not necessarily too long or too short. Sometimes people ask, well, how long should this be? And really and truly, it is what it is for any lawsuit. It whatever you need to put in there, then that's what needs to be in there, no more or no less. All right, let's see here. Oops, brought that back up. Let's not bring that back up. Let's bring up our lawsuit here. Get rid of that one. I should have had these ready to go, right? I had them open, but not quite ready, but that's okay. All right, here we go. So we have the lawsuit here, and you can see that this lawsuit was amended. All right, so let's take a look down here where we're listing the defendants. This is one of the first things that I want to talk about. Now, this is in California, as you know. It's the sheriff's department and the fire department. Okay. So you have two county government entities there. And then you actually have four individuals who were employees who were also listed there. I think all four were employees, but we'll check into that later. So they are listed in an individual capacity. So the counties uh, are defendants in this lawsuit along with these individuals. Now let's take a look at what the allegations are. So it's a violation of their constitutional right, and this has to do with the 14th Amendment. Then two allegations regarding negligence and two allegations involving invasion of privacy. Now, as I was talking about with the law school class that I taught, invasion of privacy was definitely one of those things that we talked about. We talked about both right to privacy and publicity, which are totally different things. But yeah, so we've got that appearing here. All right, let's head on into this. Now, one of the first things that they're going to do, of course, in any lawsuit is to lay out who the parties are so that everybody knows these are the defendants. As we scroll down, we'll see here we get into the introduction. And I think, sometimes we get so caught up in what happened that we forget what was going on with the people who were there. Now, remember, as it says here, and they did a really good job of setting the scene. So imagine, on the morning of Sunday, January 26, 2020. Most of us are spending our Sunday mornings with our family. So you're already setting the stage in this lawsuit about what was going on in their life, what day of the week it is. This is not some sort of weekday where I'm rushing home from work, and it's just a thing that happened. No, this is our family time. This is a family event, things that we're doing with each other and our friends. So it says on the morning of Sunday, January 26, 2020, three eighth grade girls, you guys. Eighth grade. I remember when my daughter was in the eighth grade, a long time ago, but I remember. Joined by parents and coaches, left their homes in Orange County to play in a youth basketball tournament in Thousand Oaks. Making their way by helicopter, they encountered dense fog. Rather than land or turn around, the pilot pushed into the fog and became disoriented. The helicopter descended rapidly and crashed into the foothills of the Santa Monica Mountains, killing everyone on board. Vanessa Bryant's 13-year-old daughter, Gianni Bryant, and husband of nearly 20 years, Kobe Bryant, were among those who died. Okay, so we have the scene established now. Now, some of this information came to them as the whole crash site was investigated and the events surrounding that. So once you have an investigation that takes place, you have this information that you can then put in your lawsuit. It becomes very relevant. The timing of when you file your lawsuit, you file too early, you don't have some of this information to add. So if there's an investigation and there's a report that comes out that says, here's what we think happened, that is then information that you can use to your benefit. All right. In the aftermath of the crash, several of the victims' family members gathered at the sheriff's station, devastated and distraught. Of course. But it gets worse here. The sheriff met with them and assured them that they were securing the crash site based on a leak by law enforcement. Okay. So they've established, they're putting that in here, that this was based on a leak by law enforcement. The gossip and celebrity news site TMZ had reported that Kobe, a singular figure in Southern California culture and a hero to millions around the world, had died, and onlookers were flocking to the accident scene. Now imagine, you're already distraught, you don't really know what happened yet, and some of you can probably, think back to moments in your life where something happened to you, where maybe you lost somewhere, or you got some tragic news, and in the beginning you don't really have all of the information, and you're trying to find out what's going on. You don't know, if people know things that they aren't telling you. You don't know who to trust, who to turn to, what to do, and everything is just confusion. It's like moment after moment after moment of confusion. So imagine that you're in that situation again, and the way that you get your news is through a celebrity site like TMZ, which has to be hurtful, which has to be painful. And if you're a parent and you still have other children, imagine how you now have to have those conversations. So it says onlookers were flocking to the scene. Everybody knows at this point. So the sheriff's department is trying to secure the site, according to what's in the lawsuit here. Paragraph 3 says, but the biggest threat to the sanctity of the victims remains proved to be the sheriff's department itself. Faced with a scene of unimaginable loss, sheriff's department personnel abused their access to the crash site by taking and sharing gratuitous photos of the dead children, parents, and coaches. As the sheriff's department would later admit, there was no investigatory reason for department personnel to take pictures of the victims' remains. So, you know, you're in there and the sheriff is saying, we're securing the site, we're doing everything we can. Now you guys, you have seen tons and tons and tons of these news reports where law enforcement comes forth, and they are doing an awesome job. They are doing a fantastic job sharing with the media, sharing with the world what is going on when there are tragic events. And so we are thankful when that happens. In this case, there were some issues with that, as is alleged in this lawsuit. They were saying, hey, we're securing the site, we're making sure that people aren't going to be coming in there. Unfortunately, it looks like they really didn't have to worry too much about outsiders. It looks like that the insiders were actually the ones where most of the problems came from. So number 4, within 48 hours, at least 10 members, 10, you guys, 10, at least 10 members of the department obtained and possessed images of the victims' remains on their personal cell phones without any legitimate reason for having them. The gratuitous images also became a subject of gossip within the department as deputies shared them in settings that had nothing to do with investigating the accident. One deputy even showed off photos of the victims at a bar, identifying one of the individuals depicted as Kobe Bryant, and bragging about how he had been at the crash site. Shocked and appalled, one of the bar patrons filed a written complaint with the sheriff's department. Can you imagine? You're in a bar. And more than likely, if this is a bar, there are usually TVs there, and a lot of times it's on sports and news, activity like that. And so maybe you already have an awareness, and here this employee starts to share this very personal information with you, information that should be personal for the family and for the investigation, and this person is making jokes about that. And so most people would be very bothered by being put in that situation. So this person then files a written complaint with the sheriff's department. Number 5, paragraph 5, upon learning that his deputies had taken and shared the gratuitous photos, which plainly violated the victim's families' constitutional rights to control images of their loved ones' remains, the sheriff didn't inform the victims' families, didn't initiate an internal affairs investigation, and didn't inspect the deputies' phones to determine whether and how the photos had been shared. It says he instead directed a cover up, summoning the deputies to the Lost Hills station and telling them that if you delete the photos, you're not going to face any discipline. The deputies purported to accept the sheriff's offer, receiving a free pass in exchange for destroying evidence of their misconduct. So, this is when people lose faith in government, they lose faith in officials, they lose faith in law enforcement. And this is not something that is necessarily just a problem within law enforcement. We lose faith in each other because we're humans. We don't necessarily make the best decisions all the time. In this case, we would have hoped that number one, the employees would have been more respectful, and that number two, they would have recognized the illegality of what it was they were trying to do. Even if, it takes going to court to win that case, not being transparent about what was going on. The sheriff himself then elevated this to, something that was not good to something that was even worse. So instead of sort of taking the road and saying, okay, let me call in my personal, board here so I can make sure I'm taking the right steps. Even if you don't know what to do, that is the moment to sort of step back and say, I don't know what to do. This doesn't feel right. And you have to wonder what he was thinking in those moments of time. Was he thinking maybe this is how I protect the families? Or was he thinking, I don't want this to get out? So it's not clear, we can't get in his head. But it says here, he did tell them that if they got rid of the pictures, if they took the pictures off their phones, that they would not face any consequences. Number 6, for 1 month, the department's cover-up worked, but on February 27 and 28, the Los Angeles Times reported on the deputies' photos and the department's effort to hide its wrongdoing. You guys, this stuff doesn't stay under the carpet for long. Following the reports, Sheriff Villanueva, and I'm not sure if I've got that pronunciation correctly, but there you go, admitted that his deputies took illicit photos of the victims' remains and that he informally, okay, so if you're the sheriff and you gave direction, you ordered, okay, that I don't know whether this is his, phrasing or just something they put in the lawsuit because it's not in quotations, but it does say that he informally ordered their destruction to avoid the usual routine of a formal investigation in which everyone lawyers up. So I just said we weren't sure what his reasoning was, but it appears that he may have been concerned about this possibly leading to a situation where we're in court, where it's one side against the other, where everybody's now lawyering up. At least that's what's being alleged here in the lawsuit. Number 7, following the LA Times reports, other news outlets began reporting that the misconduct was not limited to the sheriff's department. Fire department personnel had taken and shared improper photos of the victims' remains as well. Like the sheriff's department, the fire department had been aware of the egregious conduct for several weeks and responded by directing employees to destroy evidence of their wrongdoing without ever informing the victim's family. So again, we're back to, okay, so first we had the sheriff's department, now we have the fire department, and neither of them have said, okay, so people talk, we might want to talk and have a conversation with the families, let them know that this is going up. But nope. It's the LA Times that, begins reporting on this along with some other news outlets. Paragraph 8, devastated by these reports, Mrs. Bryant privately sought information from the sheriff's department and fire department to assess whether she should brace for pictures of her loved ones' remains to surface on the internet. I mean, imagine now, okay? You've gone through all of that, hearing about the crash, being informed in a way that wasn't the best way to be informed. You've been told that everything is going to be secured. You think that that has taken place, only to find out, hey, wait, I'm reading some stuff here. What's going on? At this point in time, you know, you have to feel for her, because she's probably feeling like, I can't even trust what they're telling me. You know, number one, they aren't telling me, and then when they aren't even giving me the full story. It says here, she asked the departments to explain the steps that they had taken to determine the scope of misconduct and ensure that all photos of the crash site had been secured. Both responded that they needed extra time to respond due to the unusual circumstance of needing to consult documents, then sent letters in which they refused to respond to all but one of her questions and asserted that they had no legal obligation to assist. Okay, so this is where things start to go sideways, because at this point, first of all, in my head, I'm thinking, you don't have any legal assist obligation to assist me. I'm the taxpayer, I'm the resident, I'm the one who calls 911 for assistance. And now, in a situation where that has happened with my husband, I'm now asking questions, and your response is you have no legal obligation to assist me. I cannot imagine what that had to feel like for her. All right, paragraph 9. The sheriff's and fire department's outrageous actions have caused Mrs. Bryant to um, have caused her severe emotional distress and compounded the trauma of losing her husband and her daughter. Of course, of course. She feels ill at the thought that sheriffs, deputies, firefighters, and members of the public have gawked at gratuitous images of her deceased husband and child, and she lives with the fear that she or her children will one day confront these images online. Can you imagine her children, seeing those photos out there? Many social media users and internet trolls have claimed to have seen photos of the victims' remains, and their accounts are plausible given the number of individuals who took and transmitted improper photos, the ease of which cell phone photos are electronically shared and saved in cloud storage. Okay, number 10, in addition, these photographs and at several points thereafter, members of the sheriff and fire department have chosen to act reprehensibly, and the responses to their employees' conduct has demonstrated that they either do not understand or do not care. This lawsuit seeks to impose accountability for that. And it's interesting, because a lot of times we talk about and or, and sometimes we say, oh, we don't want to put that. But in this, next to the last sentence where it says they either do not or understand or they do not care, there could be a situation where it's both. Okay, they don't understand and they don't care. It's like, well, I don't understand that. Well, and I don't care anyway. Even if I did, so yeah, there's some accountability that needs to take place. All right, so 11 and 12 really just have to do with jurisdiction and venue. All of the parties are in LA County, so that's not really an issue. All right, and then we go through the parties here where they just talk about the plaintiff and the defendant. And again, I already talked about it being both the sheriff's department and the fire department. And there's some legal things that they go through here just to make sure that they're covered. And then they go through the individuals. Remember, I said there were these individuals here listed here. And they go ahead and say that they're a resident of California. Again, just establishing that the court has personal jurisdiction over them. And of course, you have the on information and belief, because they think that this is the case, that they are residents. And it says here, as I said before, that even though, for instance, under number 19, that employee is a sheriff's deputy. Number 20, that employee is a sheriff's deputy. Number 21, another sheriff's deputy. Number 22, another sheriff's deputy. All of them are being sued in their individual capacity. So we're talking about personal liability there. And if the court then rules against them, and if there is a monetary amount of damages, then yeah, that can be painful. financially. All right, so let's talk about the general allegations here. So again, we've got the morning of the 26th, and as you see here, now remember back in the introduction, they set the stage. It was that Sunday morning, you know. Here we're jumping into the specific facts that are relevant because we're ready to lay out the allegations and the causes of action. All right, so all 9 died after crashing into the foothills. And it does talk about in 24, there was this confusion. She was initially told that there were survivors. Then she begins getting Instagram messages expressing sympathy for her loss. And this is based on a leak by law enforcement. TMZ had reported that Kobe had died in a helicopter accident. Having heard nothing from law enforcement herself, she was confused and distraught. I don't even know that I can add anything to that one. 25, paparazzi, members of the public, and a significant number of unauthorized drones flocked to the crash site. Okay, you guys, we're in that world now. You know, I might not be able to drive to the site. I might not be able to walk to the site because they blocked it off and barricaded off. But I got a drone now, and I can send that thing up in the air. You guys, take a look at this. The sheriff's department closed multiple roads and freeway off ramps leading to the site to discourage onlookers, and the FAA imposed a 5-mile no-fly zone overhead at her request. An emergency ordinance prohibited unauthorized access to the site, and the sheriff's office announced that trespassers would be arrested and charged with a misdemeanor. All right, 26. Okay, so we've set the stage for now for there to be legal action for these outsiders, okay, for the outsiders. Meanwhile, remember, the insiders are the ones that are actually taking the pictures. 26. Meanwhile, she and other family members of the victims gathered at the sheriff's station. She spoke with the sheriff and expressed concern that the crash site was unprotected from photographers. He assured her that his deputies were securing the scene. But in number 27, it says this assurance was hollow, notwithstanding his later acknowledgement that the sheriff's department personnel had no place to be taking photographs of anything. Deputies who responded to the crash scene used personal cell phones to take and share gratuitous photos of the dead children, parents, and coaches. According to the sheriff's department's subsequent investigatory report, one deputy in particular took between 25 and 100 photos of the crash scene on his personal cell phone, many of which had no conceivable investigatory purpose and were focused directly on the victim's remains. I'm going to let that paragraph speak for itself too. 28. Pictures of the remains quickly spread within the sheriff's department as deputies transmitted them to one another via text message and airdrop. Within 48 hours, okay, at least 10 members of the sheriff's department obtained and possessed photos of the victims' remains on their personal cell phones, despite having no legitimate governmental use for the photos. Making matters worse, sheriff's department personnel showed off the photos of the victims' remains to colleagues in settings that had nothing to do with investigating the crash. An investigation being handled by the National Transportation Safety Board, not the sheriff's department, okay? And yet the photos became the subject of gossip within the department. But as they've noted earlier in this lawsuit, paragraph 29 now talks about the fire department. Let's talk about what happened with the fire department. Members of the fire department engaged in similar misconduct. While working the crash site on January 26, 2020, several members of the fire department abused their access to take graphic photos of the victims' remains without any legitimate government purpose. One such instance occurred at approximately 2 p.m. on January 26, long after the downed helicopter had been identified, when a sheriff's deputy observed a firefighter taking multiple pictures of the accident scene. As the deputy later explained to sheriff's department investigators, the firefighter wasn't one of the first responders, but rather showed up after the fact and then started taking pictures as well. Okay, so, they're sort of setting the stage here. Remember, the sheriff, so the sheriff's office has said that they have secured the site. Members of the fire department are now showing up that don't have anything to do with the investigation, and they're now taking pictures. This is what's being stated in the lawsuit. This is the allegation that's being made. In addition, according to a complaint filed in LA County Superior Court in November, a public information officer in the fire department who responded that day but was not involved in investigating the accident said multiple firefighters electronically transmitted photos of the crash scene to him. Based on the foregoing, plaintiff believes and alleges that in the hours and days following the crash, several members of the fire department electronically shared and displayed the graphic images of loved ones to colleagues with no legitimate government purpose there. Okay, so let's talk about this first deputy here. Remember, they're being sued individually. All right. So it says he was stationed himself at the department's makeshift command post at this water district. He obtained multiple photographs of their remains and stored them on his personal cell phones. And he shared them with at least two individuals without any legitimate government purpose. It says he walked 100 feet from his position at the makeshift command post to chat with a female deputy. He told the deputy that he had pictures of the accident scene and for no reason other than morbid gossip, proceeded to send the photos of the Bryant's remains to this other employee's cell phone. The deputy had no role in investigating the accident or identifying those who perished, and later acknowledged in an interview with department investigators that she had no legitimate government purpose for the photos. And the deputy admitted to investigators that the deputy did not need the photos for any reason and that it was inappropriate for him to send them to her. In explaining his actions to investigators, he said that curiosity got the best of them and that such curiosity was in their nature as deputies. All right, B, it says that he electronically transmitted photos of their remains to another deputy. That deputy had responded to the general proximity of the accident scene, but also had no role in investigating it. And there was no legitimate purpose for that. And then 32 says that the deputy learned that a complaint had been filed with the sheriff's department regarding improper sharing of the photos of the crash victim's remains. The deputy then negligently or willfully destroyed evidence of his wrongdoing by deleting photos of the victim's remains and other evidence from his personal cell phone. And it says here he had an obligation to preserve this evidence of his wrongdoing, including any associated metadata, and as a trained law enforcement officer, knew or should have known that the evidence may be relevant to future litigation or investigations. And so by committing this spoliation, he severely undermined the ability to verify any of his claims regarding his handling or dissemination of the photos. All right, so that's the first individual being sued. Then we have the second one, and this was the one who had received it from the first one. He was posted at the base of the hillside where he monitored entry to a trailhead that led to the downed helicopter. At no point on the day of the accident or at any time thereafter did he have a role in investigating the accident or identifying those who perished. Nevertheless, he obtained multiple photographs of Bryant's remains on his personal cell phone. There was no legitimate governmental purpose. And then it says Cruz told another deputy, Michael Russell, that he had photos of the accident scene. Russell asked to see the photos, and Cruz texted photos of the Bryant's remains to Russell's personal cell phone. Again, no legitimate purpose for that, and he did not have a role in investigating the accident or identifying those who purchased. While at his mother's house, he showed those photos to his niece, and it says before displaying the photos, Cruz made a crude remark about the state of the victim's remains. Now we get to the bar scene here, and this is one of the I think important conversations that Vanessa Bryant is I guess feeling really hurtful by. And then others in the community too. Like I said before, if you're in this bar and somebody comes up to you and does this, it feels very disrespectful. It just feels wrong. So C, while at this bar and grill, Cruz boasted that he had worked at the scene of an accident where Kobe Bryant had died. Cruz then showed photos to a fellow bar patron and the restaurant's bartender, and he is seen on the bar's security camera, zooming in and out of the images while displaying them to the bartender. One of the photos showed the body of a girl. Cruz remarked that another showed the remains of Kobe Bryant. Shortly after seeing the photos, the bartender loudly boasted to restaurant employees and patrons that he had just seen a photo of Kobe Bryant's body and described the image in graphic detail. So this is horrible. This is horrible, horrible, horrible. I cannot imagine. Human nature, does lead us down the road of curiosity sometimes. But sometimes, we then make a decision about what we want to do with that, how we want to then proceed and go forward. I don't know what to say about that one. 35. Following the above actions, Cruz learned that a complaint had been filed with the sheriff's department regarding improper sharing of photos of the crash victims' remains. And it says, then he did the very same thing, negligently or willfully destroyed evidence of his wrongdoing by deleting photos of the victims' remains from his personal cell phone and deleting text messages he had sent Russell that contained photos of the victims' remains. He had a duty to preserve, and as a trained law enforcement officer, he should have known that this might be relevant for possible future litigation or investigations. All right, and then we get to Deputy Russell. He was in the general proximity. He was staffed at a checkpoint. Throughout the day, he had heard rumors that photos of the accident scene were circulating among other deputies. He was curious to see them himself. Russell asked Cruz to send him the photos, and Cruz sent him the photos. It says Russell saved the photos to an album on his personal cell phone so that he did not have to keep going to the text message to view them. At no point did Russell play any role in investigating the accident or identifying. Okay, guys, again, he didn't really have a role here, okay? There was no reason for him to take possession of these photos. 38. Russell shared the photos with a personal friend with whom Russell plays video games nightly. Although the friend is a sheriff's deputy, he was assigned to the Santa Clarita station, not the Lost Hills station, and had no involvement whatsoever in the response to the helicopter accident. It says in a text exchange initiated by Russell told the friend that he had pictures of the accident scene. Russell then texted photos of Bryant's remains to his friend's cell phone, noting that one of the victims depicted was Kobe Bryant. It says Russell's friend, in a later interview, Russell's friend indicated that one of the photos showed remains of a child and that the remains appeared to be the primary focus of the photo. So again, here, just as before, he negligently and or willfully destroyed evidence from his personal phone. He should have known that this was evidence of his wrongdoing and could be used in future litigation or investigations. All right. Next, Deputy Raul. Let's see. He was stationed at the Water District. He obtained multiple photographs of the Bryant's remains, stored them on his personal cell phone, and shared them with others. Let's see. The detective had responded to the general proximity of the accident earlier in the day, but had no role in investigating the accident or identifying those who perished. So it says, as a detective admitted to department investigators, he did not use the photos for any official purpose, and there was no reason for him to receive them. It says, as an indication of how casually the photos were shared within the department, the detective could not even identify the name of the deputy who sent him the photos during the interview. And so, this is really concerning for the families, because at this point, there's this sense, according to the lawsuit, that there was no respect for the families. These photos are just being shared willy-nilly. People don't know who they got them from, may not even recall who they sent them to, because there was just this rampant gossip and sharing that was going on. All right. And the same thing for him in regards to deleting the evidence. All right. So let's talk about the cover up and the destruction of evidence. So it says minutes after Cruz left the bar and grill, The bartender approached a table of 4 patrons and excitedly stated that a sheriff's deputy had just shown him graphic photos of Kobe Bryant's remains. The bartender described specific characteristics of Mr. Bryant's remains, explained how the remains could be linked to Mr. Bryant, and indicated he found the situation humorous. The bartender was poised to divulge additional details, but the patrons expressed that they did not want to hear anything further. You know, I'm not quite sure what to say there. If you're a patron, I can imagine that, like I said earlier, you feel just horrible about this whole thing. And then you probably feel disgusted and you probably feel some anger. You know, this feels very offensive. 44. In a later interview with the department investigators, one of the patrons explained that he found the situation very, very disturbing and that it, quote, bothered him the entire night, even on his drive home. Of course it did. Of course it did. The patron believed it was, quote, very inappropriate for that deputy to be there at that environment showing those pictures to other individuals, unquote. And the situation did not sit well with him at all. Upon arriving home, the patron emailed a complaint to the sheriff's department while sitting in the car of his driveway. Now, get that. He was so upset, thinking about it all the way home. He doesn't even wait to go into the house. He's sitting in his car and it's like, I got to get this off my chest right now. This is just wrong. This is killing me. I can't even walk it. I don't want to take this into my house like this. I need to say something now. I need to speak up now. A lot of times we hold back, on speaking up. We wait until it's a little bit more comfortable for us. But this person chose not to do that. He recognized that there was a problem then and there. And unlike the sheriff's department, who didn't speak up, this patron spoke up. And it can be really hard to do that sometimes, because sometimes, you do need to exercise some sort of self-care, remove yourself from the situation after somebody shared that with you in that way, in that environment, and to sort of say, oh my gosh, I'm going to need some time to process this, and that is wholly acceptable because we all individually, experience these things differently. Okay. But the fact that he was able to do something at that moment in time speaks a lot about what kind of person this patron was. He said it did not sit well with him at all. He said there was a deputy at the Baja California Bar and Grill in Norwalk who was at the Kobe Bryant crash site showing pictures of his body. He was working the day the helicopter went down. He took pictures of the crash site and bodies. He's a young deputy, shaved head with tattoos on his arm. From what I know, he'd been on the field for 4 months. So let me I want to talk a little bit about the description of the person. Okay. While I am not excusing the actions of the deputy, the fact that he was young does I think weigh into it to some extent. Okay, it says he had been on the field for 4 months, young deputy, and so it sounds to me like the patron, noted that also, because if it had just been a regular aged guy, he might not have said that. So to him, this was maybe a young person who wasn't thinking things through, had not been in situations like this before, wasn't really, understanding of what protocol is. Even though we say to ourselves, yeah, but Sheila, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. But sometimes we as young people don't always make the right decision, even when we know it's wrong. Sometimes the emotion steps in. That wisdom is not quite there yet. Okay, and we don't have that history of strength to make the right decision again and again. Like we don't have that legacy of that's sitting with us, and so we don't always make the right decisions when we're younger. And so I think there is a way to sort of say, not to say that what he did was okay, but to say, okay, well, maybe this makes a little bit more sense here, and maybe we can extend a little bit more grace, especially when he talks about how far the deputy went with this and some of the things that were said. All right. 45, under normal protocol, this complaint would have triggered a formal inquiry and an internal affairs investigation, but the sheriff didn't follow protocol, did not conduct a standard investigation, didn't collect, inspect, or search cell phones, or determine how many photos existed. Didn't do any of these things, okay? Didn't inform the LA County Office of the Inspector General. And says, most importantly, he did not alert the victims' families of the misconduct or the existence of the photos. So it said sometime in, this is paragraph 46, sometime in late January 2020, the sheriff summoned his deputies to the station and told them that if they came clean and deleted the photos, they would not face any discipline. The deputies responded by claiming that they had deleted the photos, and to the extent that they had transmitted the photos to others, those persons had also deleted them. It said that sheriff abided by his offer and did not discipline any of the deputies for violating the constitutional right of the victim's family. So for nearly a month, until their hands were forced by public reports of the photos, the sheriff and the department took no further action to investigate or contain the spread of the photos. Because, by now, they're just sort of out there. All right, 46. The above actions to avoid the consequences of misconduct are at a minimum in reckless disregard of the risk that destruction of evidence would render a complete investigation impossible. Because now the very people who are supposed to investigate are now the people who are destroying the evidence. Again, there's this loss of transparency. It's hard to support and believe the institution of law enforcement when this goes on. All right, it says, yes, we get into a little bit more there about the legal side of things. All right, the misconduct is exposed. February 27, 28, the LA Times reported that several sheriff's deputies had taken and shared photos of the victims' remains, and that the sheriff's department had been aware of the misconduct for nearly a month. It says the Times also exposed the department's attempted cover-up, reporting that it, quote, tried to keep a lid on the episode instead of following normal investigative protocols, unquote. Around the same time, it was reported that fire department personnel were sharing graphic photos of the victims' remains, and that the department responding by telling its members to destroy the photos. So again, this destruction continues. 49, in an interview with the LA Times, one of the captains said that he was unaware of any complaint regarding crash scene photos, and that there was no order given to delete any photographs. Both statements were false. Says Valdez was personally involved in responding to the citizen complaint, having spoken to the complainant himself, and the sheriff made numerous admissions about deputies taking photos of the victims' remains and his orders to destroy them without any meaningful investigation. It says those statements have admitted the facts showing that their torturous conduct and violation of Mrs. Bryant's constitutional rights. Okay, then there are the media appearances. Okay, it says in media appearances in late February and early March, the sheriff admitted that at least 8 deputies took or shared photos of the victims' remains, and he acknowledged that the conduct was disgusting. He further admitted that the improper photos had harmed people who had suffered a tragedy already. He admitted that the photos were not taken for any law enforcement purpose. Yes, this is a lot. This is definitely a lot. It says only in this case it would have been NTSB investigators, coroner investigators, and that's about it. Nobody else. So in other words, the sheriff's department should not have been taking pictures. The fire department should not have been taking pictures. Just these parties, the NTSB investigators, the coroner's investigators, and that's about it. Okay, that's about it. And then last, the sheriff's department has admitted to destroying evidence of the unlawful photos. In an interview with NBC4 LA on March 2nd, the sheriff stated that he learned within days of the crash that a trainee deputy had allegedly showed off crash scene photos at a bar. And in response, the deputy ordered the trainee and 7 other deputies to delete the photos. So remember what I was just talking about, okay? Because this was a section I hadn't even gotten to this part yet. When I was talking about the youth and the age. And it turns out this was a trainee deputy. Remember, 4 months. So the training was not quite there for him about how to do this, okay? Young, okay? And so we hope that then, what you have learned as a person, as a human, and how you're respectful for other people. We hope that that would have stepped in, even if his professional training had not. And again, it it tells you a little bit about the world that we live in, because I don't want to like beat down this other person. It tells you a little bit about the world that we live in when we look at celebrities as another commodity, like, look at my drink, or look at my new cell phone I got. And so it becomes, the humanity is just lost, it just is. So it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate here, because had this young person, had some people around him, like, where were the other members of the sheriff's department to say, hey, wait, okay, we're going on the site. Just want to remind you all, don't do this, don't do that. There's always a lot that goes on with celebrity. Were there those kinds of conversations to help someone who's young, to help someone who hasn't been, in the frenzy, in the media frenzy, with all of this interest going on? It sounds like some of that may have been missing. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that in this lawsuit yet, but it sounds like that sort of oversight may have been missing. It says the sheriff's and fire departments knew or should have known that first responders taking photos of human remains is a long-standing problem. Well, there you go. And let me just sort of click back over here, because, yeah. All right. All right, man, I think I need a drink. We're not going to do the whole thing, but we are going to get through this next section. Okay, so it says that there was a long-running problem for law enforcement. Addressing reporters on March 2nd, the sheriff said, unfortunately, ever since they invented the Polaroid camera, this has been a problem in law enforcement across the nation, probably across the world, because it makes it just so much easier. And then there's cops. They keep death books, for example, where they have photos from crime scenes throughout their careers. I don't think I needed to know that. Every police department struggles with the same thing, where people take photos and they're not evidence. So that's a practice we have to make sure that everyone walks away, and there's no evidence other than the official photos of evidence that are taken for criminal purposes. All right, then it goes, in addition, the sheriff's and fire departments knew prior to the helicopter crash that government employees abusing access to celebrity-related information has long been a problem in Los Angeles. Examples include a sheriff's department unlawfully leaking the arrest report of a prominent actor, and the LA Police Department improperly disclosing photos of a famous recording artist depicting injuries from a domestic assault. So yeah, this has already been a problem for them. This is what the lawsuit is saying. You guys knew this was a possible issue because it has happened in the past. And so you did not take the appropriate steps to make sure that it didn't happen here. Even though you said you were securing the site from everybody else, you knew there was an issue in your own house. It says the sheriff's and fire department had no policies to prevent violations of constitutional right to control the death images of deceased loved ones. All right. Since 2012, it has been clear in the Ninth Circuit that individuals have a substantive due process right under the Constitution to control death images and physical remains of deceased family members. And then there you have the case. It says this has been a problem in law enforcement across the nation. Neither the sheriff's department nor the fire department had a policy at the time of the accident regarding the taking of sharing of photos of human remains. So see, I just talked about that. There's a sit down beforehand, a layout of what we're going to do, what the process is going to be. And we go over what you can and cannot do. That doesn't seem to be the case here. At least that's what they're saying in this lawsuit. It says, following the LA Times report, the sheriff's department issued a statement that the allegations regarding the accident scene photos are currently under investigation. And then we start to have some of the exhibits that they're adding here in. It says, it is evident our photograph policy is deficient. I would say that. I would agree with him. It is evident that our photograph policy is deficient, and this incident has identified a need for me to direct the creation of a new policy. Okay, so they're saying they have a photograph policy. Is deficient. We need to create a new one, because I wasn't sure that they had one, but it sounds like they do. Similarly, in an interview with NBC4, the sheriff stated that they were creating new policies that are very specific with teeth in them, up to and including a penalty of discharge for violation of these policies. Okay. 56, they talked about how they added an entirely new section to the manual policies and procedures where it says photographs, recordings at scenes where human remains are present. It talks about preserving the dignity and privacy of the deceased and their families. Scenes where human remains are present shall only be by Scientific Services Bureau or the Department of Medical Examiner personnel. All right, it says any unauthorized release or sharing is strictly prohibited. Okay, well, this is a step forward. This is a step forward. Um, Interviews with the Sheriff's Department, they confirmed that the Sheriff's Department had no clear policy, had provided no training or instruction regarding photographs of human remains prior to the accident. And the deputies who shared the photos, they told department investigators there was no instruction or briefing on the day of the accident regarding photography of the crash site or human remains. And again, these things are very, very fluid, very fast moving. It's secure the site. It's, who is it? When are we going to tell the families? So there's a lot going on. But given that they know that this has happened in the past, where's the briefing? Where's the policy? Where's the sit down? Just to remind people as they go out into the field, where's the higher up reminding people, the captains and the sergeants? I don't know the order. So we'll skip that part for me. It says many of the Sheriff's Department personnel who obtained photos of the victims' remains were in the midst of training to become sheriff's deputies. They had recently completed such training or themselves training officers. None demonstrated any awareness of a department policy regarding the propriety of taking, possessing, or sharing photos of human remains, nor did they report having received any training on the subject. Okay, and this is what was reported in the LA Times in February 2020. A captain for the Sheriff's Department, who was the most senior supervisor, demonstrated no awareness of the Sheriff Department's policy regarding the use of personal cell phones to capture work-related environments, telling investigators that it was absolutely appropriate for department personnel to use personal cell phones to photograph accident scenes. The captain further implied that using personal cell phones to take photos of human remains would be appropriate to memorialize a scene, so long as the cell phone photos are provided to the department's homicide department. In interviews with investigators, the captain displayed no awareness of any department policy relating to taking, possessing, or sharing photos of human remains, nor did he report having received any training on the subject. Okay, so deficient. Remember earlier when the sheriff said that the policy was deficient? It sounds like maybe the policy was non-existent. It's not clear here. There's some back and forth. I'm reading this. I'm not sure. Was there a policy? Wasn't there a policy? Was there training? Was there not training? Something's been updated. How can it be updated if it never existed? Maybe it did exist. I don't know. A sergeant for the Sheriff's Department who was second in command. Okay, there's nothing he would do differently. This is what he told investigators. There's nothing he would do differently regarding the way he supervised the deputies on the day of the accident. The sergeant added that he thought the accident scene was handled great by the Sheriff's Department, and remarked that it's just one person who screwed it up for everybody. See, that's that accountability that people start talking about when they say that, we're afraid to call out our own. Okay, we don't want to air our dirty laundry of those in our own house, and so we just brush it off as it was just one person, just one bad apple, without saying, okay, nope, there's something systemically wrong with your organization because you don't even have any policies, trainings, or briefings about this. So let's put that in place. This sort of idea that we're going to not talk about it, it hinders us. It puts up more challenges for us to be able to put things in place that limit the possibility of it happening again. So let's have those conversations and not say, that it was just one person. Now, maybe he didn't know at the time. I don't know. Maybe he didn't know there were 10 people. Maybe he didn't know it was the sheriff's department and the fire department. I don't know. It says the sergeant demonstrated no awareness of the policy regarding use of personal cell phone to capture work-related environments. The sergeant stated, if it happened again, if there was a policy that specifically said on how to, I don't know, I guess how to handle any type of video or pictures, and then it would, I don't know. So he doesn't know. So, I mean, when you read that, you can get a sense of he doesn't know. Like, there's a humanity side of things, and then there's the professional, I'm an employee, this is what I'm supposed to do kind of thing. And so in the past, yeah, sometimes we're on site, we use the cell phone to take a picture of something and we just turn it in, but so what's the policy here? I'm not sure. I don't understand, because we've done it in other situations. So maybe we just don't do it in this one. So if they do a policy, I don't know. Like it sounds literally like he doesn't know, or he knows and he's just not being forward with the information. I don't know. But based on the fact that so many people have said that there's no policy, that, it's not clear, I'm inclined to think that he just really doesn't know. Okay. And that's from a professional standpoint. That's not personal. He doesn't know better. Okay. Let's have a distinction between the two. All right. So the department's failure to train its employees on the department's policy. So look, let me see how much more of this we have. And there's that. My goodness, yes. There's still a lot here. There's still a lot here before we get into the emotional distress. Okay. So let me scroll back up here, if I can find back where I was. Okay, so we're going to go over a little bit more of this, and then we might have to do a whole round 2, because right now we're just talking about the departments, the county and the employees. Okay, so here's the policy. Okay, this is regarding personal cell phones to capture work-related environments. Okay, so there's something here. This is the sheriff's department. Members shall not use a personal cellular telephone or any other similar personal communication or recording device to record, store, document, catalog, transmit, and or forward any image, document, scene, or environment captured as a result of their employment and or while performing official department business that is not available or accessible to the general public. There you go. So that is the cell phone policy. That is the cell phone policy. Now, there is no specific part of it that talks about what to do in a situation where you have a decedent, but there doesn't have to be, because it says right here, you shall not use a personal cell phone. It seems like that captures it. Okay. Then it says, according to the manual policies and procedures, supervisors must investigate reports of violations of the policy and will be held accountable for their enforcement of the policy. It says that they shall be subject to disciplinary action, which could include reprimand, suspension without pay, reduction in rank, and or dismissal from department. Okay. And nowhere in there does it say, well, yeah, we're going to let that go if you just destroy the evidence. In direct contravention of this policy, the sergeant, who was in second in command, told department investigators that they had a policy and or custom of encouraging department personnel to photograph accident scenes using their personal cell phones so that the image could be posted on the station's social media accounts, including Twitter and Facebook. The sergeant explained that at the time he received the call to respond, he was at a scene of an automobile crash taking pictures on his personal cell phone. According to the sergeant, he had taken a class regarding social media and was told to take pictures of deputies in action. The sergeant added to the Lost Hills station is really big. He said the Lost Hills station is really big on tweeting stuff out, and they're really pushing the social media, showing us in action or whatever. Okay, so here's the problem. Here's the problem, people. We finally get to what is going on here. Okay. They've got a cell phone policy. Then they've got these new informal social media policies, and they're rubbing up against each other. And nobody has sat down and really told them, yes, we want you doing this, okay, but not in violation of this. Let's go back to that policy again. It says members shall not use personal cell phone to record, store, document, catalog, transmit, image, whatever, as a result of their employment while performing official department business. So their own social media policy is not in compliance with their cell phone policy. There is this trend now, okay, for public agencies, because I don't want to single out law enforcement because it shouldn't be singled out. It's public agencies in general, to show that they are engaging with people, to show the public what they're doing with the tax dollars, with your money. And so how do we best do that? We best do that if we show you actually doing the work. We show workers out replacing broken water lines. We show the fire department putting out a fire or going through training. Okay. And so a lot of times there's not necessarily a department camera or a department public information officer who is using the government camera to do that. And you call and say, hey, can you guys come over and take some pictures of us? And then that person's responsible for posting it for your department and for your department, department A, B, C, and D. There's usually not that. There's usually one public information officer or officers. There's one public affairs department and they handle it. Okay. But now we've got this sort of informal practice of sharing, of sharing. This is the world that we're in now. We're sharing. And so what he said is probably exactly what they do. He was at an automobile accident and they're out taking pictures and saying, yes, we just helped. We just helped. We see it all the time. Who do you think's taking these pictures? You know, it's usually other government employees because we want them to share. But we need to come up with a way so that everybody understands what's appropriate and what's not. And there needs to be a very straightforward policy on what that looks like, because this is the outcome when we don't have that in place. All right, so like he said, they're really pushing this social media, showing us in action or whatever. So it says the sheriff did not discipline the deputies who took cell phone photos of the crash site and has stated publicly that department's policies at the time did not prohibit deputies' actions. These statements and actions, combined with the significant number of deputies who took the cell phone photos, demonstrate that the department failed to adequately train, supervise, and discipline. Failed to train, supervise, and discipline. Yeah, and I guess the sheriff probably felt like, well, how do I discipline people for doing something that I told them to do? Not just the destruction part, but that we told them to take pictures. How do I now do that? Yeah. All right. The sheriff's department's refusal and the fire department's refusal to provide information to Mrs. Bryant. So after learning of the existence, it says attorneys for Mrs. Bryant sent letters to the sheriff's and fire department requesting that they take immediate action to secure all photos and videos of the crash in their possession, including any photos or videos in the possession or disseminated by sheriff's department personnel. Okay. It says Mrs. Bryant further requested that the sheriff's department and fire department conduct internal affairs investigations to determine the extent of unauthorized taking and dissemination of photos. Did they do that? Says following news reports regarding the number of deputies who took improper photos, attorneys for Mrs. Bryant sent a follow-up letter requesting more information. Okay, they were trying to get more information. And then in 64 says nearly a month after Mrs. Bryant first inquired about the misconduct, an attorney for the sheriff's department wrote to Mrs. Bryant that the department had no legal obligation to respond to her questions and would not do so. And you can see those as further exhibits here. And I'll put a link or something so you guys can look at the whole thing here. So it says the sheriff's department conducts a belated deficient investigation. Okay, so here's where this deficient word comes up again. I think, yeah. It says, yeah, the department announced that it would conduct an internal affairs investigation. And then the sheriff stated on March 2nd, all photos that we know of that were in the possession of the 8 individuals were deleted. And we're hoping that this is the outcome of this, that there is no photos to be circulated anywhere. And then 2 months later, he said, we're going through the final stages of the investigation and the improper photos. And once the information is developed and it's done, we're going to make an entire investigation public. So here's the thing. How can you make an investigation public when you told people to destroy evidence? So that's what kind of investigation are you even having? This is so unfortunate, so unfortunate. Let's see. It says the report reveals that the sheriff's department has failed to take basic steps to ensure all copies of the improper photos are tracked down and sequestered. It says the department's interviews of offending personnel were notably brief. For example, defendant Russell was interviewed for a mere 38 minutes. In another interview, another individual known to possess the improper photos was questioned for only 14 minutes. For example, during, and this is in B here, it says the department lead investigator stated, "I don't know how iPhones work." And when another officer who had received photos of the victim's remains stated in his interview that he didn't know how his phone worked and had to ask my kids how to do most of the stuff. The lead investigator responded, "Right, I'm the same way. I really don't. I'm not familiar with phones like that." Several deputies told the department's investigators that they had transmitted the improper photos to one another using iPhone's AirDrop feature, to which the lead investigator responded, "I'm not too familiar with AirDrop. I've come to learn that AirDrop is an iPhone feature. Is that exclusive to iPhone?" No apparent investigative follow-up occurred. Yeah, so there's a lot of back and forth about this iPhone stuff. And C, it says one member of the department who had received the photos responded, I don't know how to get into the cloud. Because the question is, do you have these photos still in the cloud, or do you go delete them from your iCloud account? And they don't know. It says, indeed, at no point during the investigation did department investigators forensically examine the phones of personnel known to have possessed and or shared photos of the crash victims' remains using their cell phones. So the department just sort of said, oh, okay, well, if you delete them, we're good to go. And that was it. And then again, they talk about the spoliation of evidence because, this was the removal of evidence. So how can you go back and now really track things because you have told them to delete it? The deputy defendants exhibit consciousness of guilt by making false exculpatory statements to department investigators. Okay, so at this point, we're now talking about the statements that were made. It says each of the deputy defendants made false exculpatory statements to department investigators in the wake of the citizen complaint. Their decision to hide the facts strongly suggests that their misconduct was more extensive than they have admitted. Now, remember, I was talking about the one being young, and let's take that into account. But it sounds like there was a whole lot more going on than we know about. In an interview, it says one of the defendants claimed that only one of the crash scene photos he shared contained victims' remains. In reality, the number was at least 5, as the deputy to whom he sent the photos told investigator that approximately 5 of them showed human remains. So he made false statements in a memo he wrote to the head of the station. In the memo, he wrote, the purpose of me sending and receiving the crash scene photographs was to answer some questions regarding the color, numbers, and identifying features of the aircraft, as well as crash scene details. The photos were immediately erased after the incident from my cell phone. They're saying here in this lawsuit, both of these statements were false. In an interview with department investigators, he admitted that there was no need to send the crash scene photos to another deputy, but he did so because curiosity got the best of us. He also acknowledged that he did not delete the photos until January 30th, which was 4 days after the accident, when a supervisor told him to report to the station for questioning about the photos. In the interview about the bar, defendant Cruz claimed that he did not show the phone to anyone other than the bartender. He never zoomed in and out on the photographs. He did not recall human remains being in any of the images he showed the bartender. And he did not tell the bartender that one of the bodies depicted in the photos were Kobe Bryant's. All of these statements were false. Security footage reveals Cruz showing his phone to a fellow bar patron and using his fingers to zoom in on his phone while showing the photos to the bartender. You guys, video cameras are everywhere now, okay? And contrary to Cruz's claims, the bartender explained to deputy investigators that Cruz showed him 2 photos containing victims' remains and specifically noted certain details in the picture as proof that one of them reflected Kobe Bryant's remains. So he was purposefully, pointing this out. It says in an interview with department investigators on March 30th, defendant Russell claimed that he had no idea whether any of the human remains in the photos belonged to Kobe Bryant. However, the deputy to whom Russell sent the photos told investigators that when sending the photos via text, Russell said that he believed one of the individuals depicted was Kobe Bryant. Defendant Russell similarly made false statements in a memo he wrote to the head of the station saying, I shared photos of the helicopter crash scene with other law enforcement personnel. I received the photographs from Deputy Joey Cruz, who was also working this incident via text. I sent 2 photos of the aircraft crash to a deputy. These statements imply that Russell shared the photos on the day of the accident with others who were working at the scene. It says, however, Russell did not share photos with the deputy from the Santa Clarita station while working. Rather, Russell later admitted that he texted photos of the victim's remains to the deputy who worked at that station while off duty 2 days after the accident. So it sounds like what they're saying is during these conversations, they tried to backtrack and make it look like it had to do with work. But when you go and look at when the information was sent, where they were when it was sent, the video image and some of these other details, there's objective documentation that makes it clear that it didn't really have anything to do with work. That is what this lawsuit is alleging. So then there's the LA Times reveals additional details regarding deputies' misconduct. It reported here, the LA Times reported that the sheriff's department had moved to discipline an unnamed deputy for broadly sharing photos of victims' remains on his cell phone. And then you have the deputy defendants shared photos of the Bryant's remains with multiple people, including members of the public without any legitimate purpose. Okay, so here they break all of this down and said they had a morbid curiosity in the photos. They exhibited a willingness to share the photos with others through electronic transmission and without any legitimate government purpose. They displayed consciousness of guilt by telling falsehoods. They destroyed evidence. Okay, so that's what they're alleging there. And then it says California then enacts a criminal law against improper photos of human remains. So that's sort of the breakdown in what's going on and what she's alleging against the county and these defendants. And then it gets into her emotional distress. And there's a lot of reason for us to understand why that was the case. The last part has to do with suing the government, and then the causes of action. And so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to wrap that up on this first part of taking a look at the lawsuit. That's a lot, just sort of understanding what happened with these pictures and just sort of understanding human nature, the world that we live in, and how sometimes people can get so caught up in what's going on, caught up in what they're telling you to do at the job, caught up in just wanting to be a part of the frenzy and the buzz and knowing something or having information that other people don't have. There are lots of things that could be going on here, lots of things that could be going on. And these things are sort of tied into the allegations in this complaint. So I know this is still very heartbreaking for the families involved. I hope that you do not feel offended by, me talking about the lawsuit. That's not my intention. I do hope that we're learning a few things from this. And one is, I work with a lot of content creators who are using information and this sort of idea of using pictures that belong to other people. People now think that just because it's on the internet, I can freely use it. We have to be really careful about the rights of others and taking into account just not whether or not it's right, but the harm that could be done to someone else. So let me flip back over here and get out of all that. So yeah, there's a lot to unwrap with this, in terms of what was going on with the sheriff's office and with the fire department, the need to have policies, the need to have more training, the need to have empathy for other people when you're doing your job. And I'm not saying that they didn't have empathy. I'm saying that sometimes you can get caught up in a situation and not think as clearly as you normally would have been thinking. So I'd like to, extend some grace, but at the same time say that people still need to be held accountable. There still need to be rules in place, and that there still need to be the appropriate consequences. So she is going through with her lawsuit. She has been testifying. And, like I said, this is part one. It's just sort of going through what went on with the sheriff's department and the fire department. And make sure you stick around for the next video where we'll dive a little bit more into this. And man, I'm tired. I think I've worked up a sweat just sort of talking about it. That was a lot. That was a lot. But stay tuned. Don't forget to add your comments in below if you have any thoughts about this. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace. Mwah.